Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UBNradio.com.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our show. Hello, we are Del and Debbie's Mind, Body, Soul. We are invigorating talk on everything that has to do with health and well-being. We welcome you on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon in the summer, last day of July. Eek. We have a great show, so I'm going to introduce myself first and then my co-host, and then we'll get right into our introduction of our wonderful guest. But before I do, I just want to mention that we're an interactive show, and we would really like you to take some time to either call in with a question or make a comment on our Facebook page, which we keep up, which is at Del and Debbie's Mind, Body, Soul, and it streams live during the show, so you can watch us there and make a comment or ask a question if you don't want to call in. But if you do want to call in, our number is 323-284-7826. And I am one of your co-hosts. I am Debbie Carlin Boyle, and I am certified as a personal trainer, an integrative nutrition and health and wellness coach. I'm also a fitness instructor, and I help people find balance in their life with everything that feeds us in addition to the food on our plate. And sitting right next to me is...
Hello, I'm Lady Jones, and I'm a certified transformational coach and a 3 principles practitioner. I teach psychological well-being so that my clients can achieve a more peaceful, loving, and joy-filled life regardless of their external circumstances. So today we have a very exciting show. So basically, after surviving her own near-death experience, today's guest found herself able to read the ethereal field of an individual, linking her to the person's history and gaining insight into how their past experiences were creating their present reality. So by creating a new awareness, Dr. Mary Helen Hensley has helped hundreds of clients turn their anguish into insight, distress into discernment, and heartbreak to healing. So please help us welcome internationally renowned author, speaker, chiropractor, and metaphysical healer, Dr. Mary Helen Hensley.
Welcome, Mary Helen.
Thank you, ladies. I am so excited to be here.
To all of those credentials you have. My goodness.
Really.
Really happy you could join us.
I'm changing my card to window washer.
Well, you do have
mother as well.
Say that you are a window
washer
washer of the soul. Yeah, I read that. I think that's beautiful, and we're going to talk about what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Welcome, because we know you also don't live in this country.
Yes, we're very, very lucky to have you.
So we got a moment in time where we could pull you in. We did, very quickly.
Well, I am grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your patience of your 2 beautiful daughters that are
yes,
sitting
they're
in the green room.
Hi, guys. We see you.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, hi.
So we like to get started from the beginning, and we want to know where you're from. Obviously, that's not an Irish accent,
No.
so our audience probably can guess it's a little bit Southern, and we want to hear about your beginnings and what brought you to where you are today, and definitely about what Del mentioned in the introduction, your near-death experience. It changed your life.
Yes, it's always interesting when you walk up onto the stage and they're introducing, this is Dr. Mary Helen Hensley, and she's from Athlone, Ireland, and I'm like, hey, y'all.
Wait, what?
Yeah, they're like, what? I've lived in Ireland almost 20 years, and
and the girls don't have an Irish accent either.
Well, they've just had me as a mother.
Yeah.
I think the Southern is so strong that it overrides. Now, if you were to hear them back in their own environment with their
when
friends,
they get
and
in,
all
Well,
that,
I definitely heard Gemma seems to have a stronger Irish
yes,
accent. For
absolutely,
sure. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Beautiful
So,
accent.
but you have to remember, Irish kids are growing up with American TV.
That's right.
And so you
We're
walk
all
into
around.
you walk into Starbucks to order a coffee, and
Yeah.
and you get it back in an American accent from a 20-year-old,
Wow.
and it's because they've grown up on American TV.
And it's so funny. I noticed that, especially in Scandinavia, when the Scandinavians speak English, they all speak with an American accent.
Better than we do.
Exactly, because they learn by TV. Exactly.
Yes,
funny.
Yes.
So, all right.
But you grew up in the South. Whereabouts?
I did in Virginia, in Martinsville, Virginia,
Okay.
and I literally just put my mother on the airplane before I got here. So
You did.
Mom
Thank
is
you.
89 and still lives in Martinsville and loves to come on whenever we're in the States. Comes on all of our adventures with us. So she's
Yeah.
just spent the last 2 weeks here. So
Lovely.
I've just sent her back to the sunny
Fabulous.
South, and so that's where it all began.
Yeah.
Tell
And-
us about the beginnings.
The beginning. Well, my mom is Helen, and my father Dick Hensley was coach to everyone in town. He was quite a remarkable character. He was headmaster of a school. He was a coach of the local high school football team, and he was also a minister. So I am a Southern girl and a preacher's daughter.
Yeah.
And so
Baptist.
Southern Baptist,
Yes.
exactly. But
Okay.
interesting because I think of his coaching and just the type of individual he was. It was never kind of the holy roller, fire and brimstone. I didn't grow up in that. I grew up in an extremely motivated, positive, and in the South in the very early 70s, absolutely zero tolerance for racism. I was very fortunate in my area to
Wow.
have
Yeah.
I love
the
hearing
type
that.
of parents that I
Good.
had, and just the ethos for life that they had. So I was, instilled with that early on.
Wonderful.
But what was interesting is that when my mother was pregnant with me, she was in that first trimester, and she went to the doctor and found out she had German measles.
Ooh.
And so she was already over 40 at this
Yeah.
stage. And so basically they sat my parents down and said, look, expect the worst. This is
Yes.
not going to turn out well. There's going to be some issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point during the pregnancy, my father, the minister, has what he described as a celestial visit, which is very odd coming from a preacher who, we
religious.
talk about angels and this kind of thing, but he always called it a celestial being.
Somewhere from.
So there were no wings and halos
universal.
and this kind of thing. There was a presence that came to him and said, not only is this child going to be okay, but she's going to be a little bit on the unusual side. So you can only imagine, they're waiting and counting fingers and toes and looking,
Now,
Yeah,
was
they
this,
didn't know what
were
they
you their
meant by
first
that.
child?
I'm
Or?
the last.
Oh, the last of how
Yes.
many?
How many? Yeah.
The last of four.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so my oldest brother, who's, he's almost 18 years older than me,
Oh,
and
my
he was
goodness.
gone off to the Air Force Academy by the time I was even old enough to remember. So
What's
we
the
were
closest
spaced.
age? What was the third?
So I have a
child?
sister who was born the exact same. We were born on the same day, 10 years apart.
Oh,
my
is that-
goodness.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
it's kind of
Yeah,
sucks
really.
for a 10th
You know,
birthday
my
present.
best friend and her sister were born on the same day, 2 years
That is
apart.
interesting.
Yeah.
What was going on 9 months before
I
that?
know.
Of
Hey,
celebration.
it's some anniversary.
They do say that women are fertile at a certain time of year, and so that siblings tend to group up and very close to each other at times of years.
And then
saw
I have a
that.
brother
Yes.
who's 4.5 years older than I am.
Yeah.
So, and then me.
Okay, so,
So-
the break is 4.5, and then you came with this message that said,
You're gonna
be
be-
prepared.
Hey,
Something's
hey,
going to
I'm
be
here.
off.
Yeah,
A
so
little
it
unique.
wasn't too long before things started getting strange.
Yeah.
And my greatest companion, my very best friend when I was a child, was my grandfather, Judge. Now, Judge was Dr. Garland Clark. He was a surgeon from Kentucky. Fascinating history. He actually served out here in Long Beach when during World War II, and so it's been so much fun taking Mom back to these places where she was a child, and we've been recording little videos and getting the history. People out there, if you still have a loved one of that age alive, get the iPhone,
I
get on
know.
there, record some of that history. We were in Knott's Berry Farm last night, and she'd sit down at the table and eat with the Knotts, I mean, crazy stuff. And so it was just amazing. But Judge, my grandfather, was my greatest companion as a child, and he used to tell me all sorts of things. And I was very into medical stuff even when I was little. I loved illness, and I loved hearing about it and how to fix it and what was going on. And he would take me to meet people and all this stuff. And when I turned about 4, my parents sat me down and they were like, "Okay, enough. Do you understand what the difference between alive and dead is?" 4.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, sure I do. And they're like, do you understand that judge isn't a person? And I was like, whoa.
Oh, my hairs
yeah.
are standing
Yeah,
on end here.
it's like the cartoon where the
Talking
safe
to
drops out of the
your-
window and whacks you on the head,
To
and your
your
entire
dead
reality-
grandfather.
Exactly.
Wow. So he was visiting you.
All the time.
Wow.
And so this continued on through my entire childhood.
And was it something in your dreams, or was it really was it really concrete?
he
and
looked like a person to me.
Yeah.
But during the day, or like as you went around your average
Anytime.
day, he'd pop up and
But
wow.
mostly at night. Mostly, I've
Yeah.
never ever since I was very very small been a good sleeper.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always afraid I'm going to miss something, so I'm always up and at him, and he was always there.
Yeah. Now, what happened when your parents asked you that? I mean, did you have the awareness in that at that time that he actually wasn't in physical form?
Not until they said something. So you've got this paradigm shift taking
Yeah.
place at 4, where you're beginning to realize the world isn't exactly the way that you thought it was.
Now, had they talked a lot to you about him and things? Had you seen photographs?
No, he had
and-
died when I was 1.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so I really wasn't.
Yeah, you really didn't
aware
have a good
enough
perception
to know
of him.
exactly.
Yeah.
But as far as I was concerned, he was as real as you two are sitting there.
Wow, incredible.
How did he? I'm just curious how
Yeah.
he passed away. Was he
was
ill?
he was serving. He was constantly. He was one of these country doctors who was always in the hospital making the rounds, delivering babies. He was always on, and so he died of a massive heart attack. You know, he came home from the hospital, crossed the threshold, dropped, and not long after that, he was.
Okay.
He was gone. He worked himself to death, basically.
Well, it sounds
and
like
I
it,
always
yeah.
said, I do a lot of work at the ARE, the Edgar Casey facility in Virginia Beach. And I remember the very first time I ever went there and saw the couch where Casey used to go into trance and do his stuff. And it had a cover on it. And the guy who was taking my mom and I around, he lifted the thing up and he was like, that's the actual couch. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. It was tattered and worn. Yeah. And in that moment, he was 66 and my grandfather was 66 when they died. Wow. And I was like, I'm not going out like that. I'm here to serve. I will give you all that I've got, but I have to learn how to keep the boundaries.
No, exactly.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially when you're sensitive and you just pick up on everybody's energy.
And
What
it can help
did he
people
used
with
to
it.
share with you when
Yeah.
he'd come with it, besides his medical information?
Yeah, well, that was a huge thing. And so I had this thing from the time I was small where I seemed to be able to call in these bizarre ailments. I had fifth disease. I had mumps several times. I had all of these strange, my mother would tell you, every strange ailment. And it has continued into adulthood. But I'm also able to get rid of them very quickly. And it's like I experiment
You
with
have your
this
own
body.
personal doctor.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's made me a really good doctor because
Yeah.
there's really not an awful lot that people can come to me with that I haven't had.
Yeah.
Yeah, which helps you help other people.
Yeah.
And can I ask you, is your grandfather still?
Oh, very much so.
Okay.
Very,
All
very
right.
And
much
do you
so.
have other people come and visit
Yes,
you?
I was going to ask you
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll have a,
Absolutely.
Okay.
we'll have
We'll
a word
get to them later.
So yeah, so how did it, so throughout your so now you're 4, and this is a shift, a big paradigm shift, and then so how did that manifest and play out once you realized your grandfather wasn't around, but yet he was for you? And were your parents, they sound to be pretty evolved and very accepting and very loving, and through love they allowed you to feel this,
Yes,
and know this.
But Dad went into kind of Papa Bear mode at that stage, and he was
Protective.
starting to see what was going on, and he decided at that stage, we better not talk about this stuff outside of
well,
the family.
and that's true.
Yeah.
That's true,
And-
because
and-
people will think, "Ooh,
Exactly.
yeah."
And interestingly, they chose not to tell my siblings, which was
hard on you.
it was hard
Now,
on
did-
me. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were the only one out of the children that was demonstrating this
Yeah.
gift.
Mhm, absolutely. So it kind of evolved into the prophetic dreams, and they would just kind of wait for me to arrive at the kitchen table and go, "Hi, Mrs. Jones, down the road will be dead on Tuesday."
Wow.
And my dog, all sorts of things. I would just dream it and they would die. And it was like I was tapping into the World Wide Web of psychic information.
future.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
So
But you
grow
knew no
up.
different.
I didn't.
Yeah,
It would be weird
so-
for me not to be able
Right,
to do it. I
exactly.
would find that very disconcerting. But
So-
you grow up and you're a teenager and
You
you're
don't know how to use it.
right. And so I
yeah. Mm-hmm.
didn't talk about it outside of that. And then by the time I hit college,
Just before you
Yeah.
talk about college, did you always know you wanted to be in the medical profession?
no,
No.
art.
Art. Okay.
Yes, yes, I was in television. So I went off to college and I studied communications and graphic design. And I am now at the stage of where I'm not a good sleeper. I'm moving into an insomniac because what would happen, you're 18, you're self-conscious, boys are interacting, you're in that whole college scene. And I was almost keeping myself from going to sleep because I didn't want to see anything.
Oh.
And so it got, and
wow.
my
That
grades
becomes a problem.
My grades reflected it. My first 3 years of
Changes
college, it
everything
was
in your body.
crazy. Exactly. And I was exhausted.
Hormones, your cortisol levels.
And I'm
are way
sure you
low.
weren't sharing it either with anybody, because that puts people get very nervous if they think that you have a gift that they can see, that you can see into what they're doing or what they're thinking. People get very nervous. And
Well,
run
my
away.
roommate knew because 9 times out of 10 I wake up like this, and and a lot of visits in the night and this, and I had to tell her, so she always knew. She was a great confidant with that.
Men can get nervous. Let me put it that way.
You think? That's why I'm still single. But no.
So through college, you kind of kept it sequestered, if you will. Yeah.
But then I started kind of making a joke of it, which that went down really well. I was a cheerleader, and so I can predict things and see things, and so I would go and I'd write the score down to
for
the
the
basketball
games.
games, stick them in the
yeah.
drawer,
Oh, nice.
and everybody'd come back, crack open a beer, and we'd there's the score.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so this is the extent of my service to humanity.
yeah.
There was no lottery in
Yeah.
those days.
So
Well, it's a
exactly.
good Vegas trick, at least.
Well,
You
and
could-
people
you
are like,
could-
it's so wonderful you had this divine near-death experience. It was because I was so stupid is why I had it. And so I'm spending the rest of my life trying to
'cause
get
it
other
needed
people.
to knock you into what you were
Exactly.
meant to be doing.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I graduate from college, and in the South, if you're still dating the same guy that you've been dating through college, next thing you're talking China and silverware and all of this kind of stuff. And so I was engaged shortly after my accident, but I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, because that's where my intended was from. And so, with my big degrees in communications and graphic design, and when I was in college and you're interning and I was in ABC, and I was, the Gulf War was on, and, I got called from behind the scenes doing the graphics because they were short reporters. And this guy came up to me and he said, we're going to put you in front of the camera because you've got a great head for it. And I'm like, oh, thanks very much. And he's like, no, you have an anatomically large head. And I was like, dude, are you kidding me? And he goes, Oprah Winfrey, that's how she got her start. I was like, shut up, So,
That's so mean.
I had done all of this.
funny.
And I go to Charleston, and I'm knocking on doors thinking I'm going to be just gifted with this wonderful job. And so, as it turns out, I end up mopping floors in a sign company. Best thing that ever happened to me,
Wow.
because the man, Frank, I'll never forget him, the guy who took over, and he owned all these sign companies, and he put the mop in my hand. He said, you will thank me for this later. And I learned that job from the bottom up.
Yeah,
and it
absolutely.
put some,
Best way to learn a
best way to eat some humble pie too. And it was a really, really great experience. And so it was their Christmas party, December 14th, 1991. And it's Charleston, and it's hot. And I'm wearing my bright red shorts and my Santa Claus T-shirt, and I'm on my way to the Christmas party. And I get about 2 miles from home, and I'm sitting at a stoplight, and there's a lot of lanes of traffic this way and this way. Nothing like LA, but big for us. And so I'm sitting at the light, and my light turns green. And by the time I'd made it across, however, 3, 4, 5 lanes, whatever it was, I get to the end, and I look left because I'm this way, and this car is barreling towards me.
Wow.
And in that moment, my whole world changed because everything just slowed down. It's like something you see off a movie.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. we
And I'm
often
just
hear
sitting
that
there,
from people.
and I'm like, oh, you're getting ready to die. Okay. You have a choice. You can stay in your body, experience the impact, then go, or you can go ahead and go. And I'm like, I think I'm going to go ahead and go. Thank you.
Yeah, really.
And so
No need to ask
I'm
twice.
completely aware at this stage of this sound. And it sounded like, I always compare it to you're from Wales, the bagpipes in a nice pub session.
Yes, yes.
And they're droning in the background, and there's wah, wah. It was this kind of deep and low vibration. And I'm like, okay, something's happening here. And next thing, I feel myself lifting out. Now, mind you, the accident hasn't
I was
happened
going to
yet.
say you hadn't been
The
hit
impact.
yet.
No, but I'm lifting
so there's
out.
no light or
Yeah,
it's
so
just the sound.
The meat suit is sitting in the car holding the wheel, and I'm lifting out. Next thing I'm looking down, and it's accompanied by that bizarre vibration.
Yeah.
All of these years later, I have come to realize that the frequency that we actually are, the light beings that we are, carry a certain frequency. And so the human body, the human form, the 3D experience of being on Earth is a very dense experience.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I was feeling myself raising out of this plane. And so next thing I'm looking down and everything sped up just like that. I see the car smash in. It T-bones me, so folds the driver's side of the car. I watch my head go through the window, back in, and I'm just like, where's the popcorn? You know, it was the
Like a
most,
movie.
it was unreal. I was so detached. But the first thing that I noticed in that moment was I couldn't care less about my body.
Yeah.
And this was so bizarre.
Because you
And
detached.
Exactly. And the thing is no matter how many bizarre metaphysical experiences I had been privy to as a child, I'm still a human being, and it was always in the back of my head, what if I cease to exist when I die? What if me being here just never mattered? It was, you were there for that run, thanks very much, and then it's over. And in that moment, I realized I knew exactly who I was. I knew who I'd just been. But I'm looking down, and I always compare at this stage, if you can imagine being out in that heat, and you're out working in your garden, and you're sweaty and hot, and you come in and you throw the clothes next to the washing machine, and you go up and take this glorious shower.
Yeah.
The last thing you're thinking about is the dirty clothes.
Yes.
So I'm looking at the body. It's hanging there. My head's gone through the window. The car's spinning around. It comes to a stop. And now, obviously, all the traffic stops and people are beginning to congregate. And I'm just watching. And I'm like, wow. And I'm observing all of the things that are happening. And right at that moment, that drone, that vibration changes. And the pitch gets higher and higher. And I can feel myself changing. And this is where everybody asks the tunnel of light question. And for me, it happened so quickly. I was here, and then I was here.
Back in
And
your
it was
body.
like landing in Oz in Technicolor.
Wow.
And it was absolutely nothing like I had been taught to believe growing up. And it was nothing I'd learned in any Sunday school lesson, let me tell you. And so that was what really started to authenticate that experience for me, because it wasn't coming from my expectation.
Sure.
Jesus wasn't meeting me at the gate.
Yeah.
My dead relatives weren't all congregated with open arms. There I was, and I was in this space of complete and utter bliss and just home, that wonderful feeling of home. But there were sounds, and there were colors, and it was very busy, and there weren't angels playing harps on clouds. This was active, involved, just as much as where I had just come from, but in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is awesome.
Jarvis, you're
Yeah.
shaking
I have
your
a-
head. Yes, I'm
Rock
just
on,
curious.
Jarvis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I
did
have-
you have a near-death experience? Because you're validating it right now.
I had an out-of-body experience.
You
So it wasn't
did.
near death, but I did separate.
That's
And I
what
felt
I.
what
you,
she
you're
felt.
just sitting
That
here
brings-
shaking. Yes, that's very interesting.
That brings me to the
Okay.
question I was going to ask. Exactly that. Do you have to? Because I've had exactly the same experience too, but it was an incredibly painful, emotional experience that I was going through, not a physically dying experience. But would you say that
I
that's?
think they're all very similar, to be
Yeah.
honest. You know, you have the and that out-of-body experience, and
Yes.
you come back in, yes, whatever emotional pain you were in, or for some people it might have been a drug overdose or whatever. They might not have actually died,
Yes.
but that they separated from the
Separated.
body.
Yeah.
And like I had an immunization at the age of 12, and you know my mom had gone to my father's football game and left me with a babysitter, and she brought me from the doctor thinking everything's fine. She's just a little lethargic. And next thing I know, I'm sitting on this couch and I'm like a rag doll, and the people were trying to entertain me. And I remember this guy making a hat out of newspaper and
so
putting
you
it on my
remember
head.
it.
And I'm looking down at that body, and I knew the body was sick. And in this situation, I didn't go any further than that, though. And this is where that vibration comes in. It's that changing from one frequency to the next, I think, that separates the out-of-body experience to that going into that next level.
Yeah.
But it's all, you know, it's all much of a muchness, really. It's all the same
it
thing.
is because it's energy. Because again, in not a painful experience, I've experienced that absolute, body quaking and the most incredible feeling of love. And I didn't, at the time, I couldn't even give it the word love. I just didn't, it was the most bliss.
It sounds so cliche,
Yeah,
and you just sit here
exactly.
and you do the best that you can telling people, just wait, y'all are going to love it.
It just,
Yeah.
But there's color and there's
Hear
the
this
thing is
so
you can
much.
feel that vibration coursing through whatever we are.
Yeah.
And you're just part of it and you feel part of that. So it was at this stage that I'm in this space and I'm looking around and just taking it all in and still completely aware of who I am. But now I'm suddenly becoming aware of the fact that I've been other things.
Yeah. Oh, very cool.
Yeah, for a little girl from the South, this was a whole new experience because now we're getting into the realms of, oh, wait a minute, I've lived before. And I'm becoming aware because it's like I'm remembering. That veil is lifted and suddenly I'm connecting to who I actually am again.
Now, is that something that was new to you? Or during, I don't really know much about Southern Baptists, but do they believe
Reincarnation?
in
No, that's all been edited out of the Bible by the time it got to us.
Okay. All right. So this
Believe
is
it or not, a very, very prominent part of early, of early Christianity and beyond. Go into many of the religions. I just finished writing a chapter in this new book that we're releasing in September about that very thing.
Wow.
The religions that believe that we continue on, and so many of them that we've been here many times before.
What
Yes.
about heaven and hell? Is that something that
Absolutely, categorically, I will sit here and look the two of you in the eye and go,
No.
bollocks.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is
Okay.
a completely
Yeah.
man-made
my
concept.
goodness.
Hell, you put yourself through
Well,
hell
exactly.
every single day.
Well,
So-
exactly.
But a physical place, no. And the same for heaven.
Yeah.
And, when I try to explain, they're like, what's God like? I'm like, God is a feeling. God's a
love.
vibration. And, there was no guy sitting there in the chair with the beard and the robe and the whole thing. It just wasn't like that.
Yeah.
However, out of this beautiful atmosphere, the air in front of me just started to take shape, and there's suddenly these two beings. Totally know it was for my benefit because remember I said I didn't die because I was so evolved. I died because I was stupid and not
Yeah, they
using the
wanted
It was,
you
gift.
it was
to
a slap
use
upside
it.
the
Yeah.
head you needed.
It's like
Totally.
step up. Yeah.
So these beings step out from this space, and I'm looking, and you ladies look about the same age as me, and we're all sharing that same part of life where suddenly your memory will just escape
Yes.
you. Try being a doctor and doing that, and you're trying to come up with a medical term in front of somebody,
Right,
and
trying
you're
to be
like,
logical.
oh, that. Ooh, ouch, or what? No words. There's just nothing, and they just leave you. And I felt the very same way in that space. And I'm looking at them going, oh my gosh, I know you. And they're waiting very patiently and very lovingly. And I'm like, I know you. And then it hit me. Light switch goes on, and these were my guardians.
Wow.
So now I'm introduced to this new concept of, oh, I have guardians. Oh, and you've been with me the whole way through. You know my whole story.
Oh, through all your multiple lifetimes.
All of them.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
so once they allowed me the space to remember,
Yeah.
bang, talk about a homecoming. Oh my gosh. No words, no sounds, no that I could even begin to describe that kind of joy.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is awesome. So now, am I thinking about the body back in the car? Couldn't care less,
Yeah.
right?
Dirty clothes.
Certainly couldn't care less. And so at this stage, they are with me, kind of like my little cheerleaders and, arms around me. Well, there weren't any arms, energy around me. And next thing, it was like, do you know the IMAX theaters that have the
Yes.
360?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, all
So
around
it's like
you.
I'm standing in the middle of this. And now here we're getting ready to shift the paradigm again because concurrent is going to become a new word in my vocabulary. And I'm looking at 10 years old happening over here, and I'm looking at
Your life
19
does
happening
flash
over
before
here.
you.
And
Oh,
it's
wow.
happening simultaneously.
Yes. Yes. No space or time.
But so are the other lifetimes.
Oh,
Ooh.
ones that you can't recognize.
Yeah. Hello, time bender. And I'm just looking around. I'm in total awe. But all of it makes sense. Nobody's having to try to convince me of anything. This is the most magnificent experience, and I just envy everybody who gets to go back and remember it for the first time all over again. Because I tell you, it's difficult sometimes walking through with the memory, as wonderful and joyful as it is.
Yes.
My friend Peter, that you all were
Yes.
speaking to the other day, we work so well together because Peter had a very different experience
He did.
where
Yes.
he didn't want to come back.
Exactly.
I was all, I'm going back. I'm good. When the time came that I had done the review, I had seen who I had been in that 21 years, and it was so loving. And this was at the point where I'm looking around going, hang on a second. I was aware that the religion that I had grown up in talked about being judged. And I'm going, oh, well, I've been here a while. Where's the judge?
Yeah.
And then I realized it's me critiquing myself the whole time. And I'm like, I'm my own creator. I'm my own judge. Whoa. And I'm like, this is incredible. And so I put my hand up and I said, can I go back? Am I good? I get this. I get it. I get what you wanted me to see. I see what I wasn't doing with these talents that I came in with. Sign me up. I'm in. I have one request. I'm going to go back in and I will be everything you want me to be. I'm going to write the books. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to bang the drum, do whatever, make a fool of myself, whatever you want me to do. I can't care what other people think about me.
Absolutely. Now,
And
had
it has
you,
stood true.
now,
goes the
were you
judgment.
somebody that used to care a lot before this experience?
I
would
was
you
a
say?
chubby kid. And so, when you've had the chubby kid teenager experience,
Yes.
it's hard because you're always, the boys are always your best friend and that kind of thing. So it's part of that human experience of growing up and evolving. And, I was always the funny one. And also, did I care? Not out. I was always this kind of person. I was always very happy and excited to be alive. But I'm sure deep down there was that thing about wanting to please, to impress, to...
So there was something in you that was holding you back prior to this experience.
Yes.
And you knew that you were not going to go back to that.
Ask anyone who knew
Yeah.
me then, and nobody would agree with that because I was always very outgoing.
Yeah.
But, we sit with our own demons.
No, exactly.
And,
Right. Yeah, that's
people have
right.
no
Don't
idea
know.
what's going on behind the eyes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And, so I just said, from this day forward, that's it. Now, do I slip nowadays? I'm like, I've been whooping it up in L.A. and I had a dessert this big the other day, and I put on a few LBs, but it
okay.
doesn't alter who I am, the message that I
absolutely,
have, and
right.
I'm able to sit in that space very comfortably.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that expression, the meat suit.
I mean, the meat wagon.
Yeah, really.
So you, when you made that decision, you came back to your physical self.
Yeah. So next thing, that sound comes. It's there the whole time, but it's getting louder, and that vibration is shifting and changing, and I'm now going back. And I won't say down because it wasn't like that. It was like whoosh, everything's going in fast forward, and all of a sudden, breakneck speed, boom, I'm back in. And the next thing that I remember is waking up on the pavement, and I'm there, and I'm out of that car, and it's an incredible thing because, being me, I'm an overachiever, and I attempted to stand up, not realizing my neck is broken,
Yeah.
And so I go up, and I remember standing there, and then somebody put me straight back down, and I'm strapped onto the board. The neck is in there, and I'm put into the back of an ambulance. I get into the ambulance, and there's this lady, and she's stroking my hair. I'll never forget her, and she's driving. The guy's driving, and she's back there with me. It's okay, sweetie, it's okay. And I'm talking about dying. And I'm hysterical now at this stage. No, sweetie, we're not going to let you die. I've already been dead, like a lunatic. And she's like, head injury, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And so I arrive into the hospital, and this is where it gets very interesting because the broken neck was missed.
Well, they didn't.
Yeah, I
diagnose
couldn't
that.
swallow properly. Yeah, it was a Saturday, and I don't know what the
Doctor shifts are,
circumstances
yeah.
were, but
Right.
it got missed. Thank goodness it got missed though, because it started me on a trek of having to heal my own body. I mean, I was messed up. My spine went from this to that in a split second, and I'm crooked all over the place. And I'm all right. I made peace with that. It's all good. I've got glass had shattered and gone up my legs. My pelvis had been trapped by that seat belt, and the seat folded up and underneath me. So I'd been told no children, no nothing.
Oh,
You've
wow.
met my two
Yeah,
girls.
Beautiful
And so
girls.
it was
Did
just
you have broken ribs and
I've had everything. And this is where it was so interesting because not long after, when I'm doing this whole kind of trying to rehab myself back into health through chiropractic, I had this amazing chiropractor, a guy called Dr. Tony Ross on Johns Island. And he took the time to educate me. I wasn't just another patient. I wasn't just, another bit of money coming in. He sat and he explained every single thing. Well, buddy, he picked the right girl because I'm illness girl. Talk to me about all of it. Tell me
Right.
what's happening.
Wanna cure yourself.
And then I'm really proud to have it. And I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. But then set in the panic attacks because I couldn't swallow properly.
Yeah.
But I was good with it all. I was so aware now that this was just the body. I had made an unchangeable separation from the fact that I was my body.
I know.
You can't go back after an experience. Once
absolutely.
you've separated, you can get caught up in it every now and again. We're human, but that knowing, that deep knowing inside that I am not this body,
yeah,
forever
Which
changed.
is-
Just your vehicle for this lifetime.
Absolutely. And
That's
so Judge, the grandfather who's deceased many, many years at this stage, he rocks up and he says, guess what? You're going to be going back to school. Now, remember, it's December of 1991. I just graduated in May of 1991. And you know, when you've been in school all your life.
You're like, I'm done.
I was like, not just no, but
work.
hell no, I am not going back. And he's like, you have to go back because with what's coming next, you've agreed to take on this role. You've agreed to come in here and do these things. You made that choice yourself. I said, I did.
Yeah.
And he said, you've got to know the human body inside and out. And chiropractic gave me license to feel people up within the confines of the law and get to know these abilities that I had. I could touch someone and start downloading because this is the gift that came with the accident. I suddenly found myself able to move past just the knowing or the dreams or the, you know, seeing the dead people to I could touch someone and it was like downloading a hard drive.
So this is the ethereal field that you...
Yeah.
So,
And so-
it's by touch then?
Not always.
Not
No,
always,
it's
yeah.
way evolved now since then. Remember, we're still back in
Oh, okay.
1991 here. So I could touch someone and I could see things. And it was like a movie would start playing in my mind. And they might be 10 years old being raped by an uncle. They might be, you know, it might be a different time in their life. And so because I'm in chiropractic and, you know, you're interning in school and you've got all these patients coming in, I'm touching every walk of life.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning to become familiar with the fact that as soon as I touch here and I'm getting this sensation and I've got somebody sitting with thyroid cancer in front of me, I become like this medical intuitive. And so I begin to get really good at developing those skills.
Wait, and to let them know that they have thyroid
Nope.
cancer? No.
Nope.
But are they coming to you because they
They were
already...
coming for chiropractic care.
Yeah.
Right. But did they know, you know that they're suffering from thyroid cancer. Do they know at this point that they're suffering?
No.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So imagine,
All right.
this is where, you know,
Yeah,
it
the
all
dilemma.
sounds
Oh,
fabulous.
yeah,
And,
right.
But it was
It's
tricky.
weird.
It's very
Yeah.
tricky. Yeah.
And so, you know, you're working through this, and that's exactly what Judge had wanted me to experience, getting to know these people because, you know, I was in practice for many, many years, and it got to the point where that line got so gray. You know, I'm in there, and I'm on the table, and I'm working on somebody, and the dead grandmother's in the corner, and I'm like, I do that on Tuesdays. You know, I'm in the office. It was really getting tough.
Yeah, that's a lot
And
of
so
stuff going on.
After thousands, I'd say over probably 150,000 patients at this stage have passed through my hands. And because I'm in Ireland and there's no chiropractors around me for miles. And so
exactly.
you
So
can
you're
imagine
it.
I'm it.
Yeah.
And at that stage, I'm trying to make a decision to get out of what I'm doing. But I loved my people. I loved my patients. But it was becoming such a dilemma for me because, you know, they're coming in to buy a Volkswagen and I'm trying to sell them a Cadillac, you know. And it was really hard professionally not to cross that line because that deep and feeling and caring part of you sees that person suffering and they're so absorbed in the grief of the loss of their parent or partner, and you want to go, they're right here.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And you didn't feel that you could share that with anybody?
Not in that setting, but then it
Okay.
started to creep.
Oh, good. Okay.
And then it started creeping so much that I was definitely getting the call. And as we all know, again, being the divine and loving humans that we are, sometimes we get that very loud message and we
Yes,
say the
gotta
divine
follow.
God, and we just don't listen.
Oh, no.
And so I'm getting the time to get out, because I was doing it on the sly for years. I had a separate little metaphysical practice where I was doing this and just living that dream. And it was wonderful, but it was over here. And so knock, knock, time to get out. And so finally one day, and I'm like, okay, Easter. When I finish at Easter break, after the summer holidays, and I'm just
Making
like, it's
deals
ridiculous.
with yourself. Yeah.
And so finally this guy comes in, 6'4" rugby player, and he's standing in the office, and I'm talking away, and I pull out the plastic spine, and I'm like, you're subluxated here. And he's looking at that, and he starts doing this, and next thing he swoops once, and boom, right on top of me. And I hear this sound that sounds like paper tearing. I'm like, please, God, let that be my pants. And it was my shoulder. And he had torn my rotator cuff, ripped my shoulder out of the socket, which, of course, is the kiss of death for a chiropractor.
Wow.
And it was like, and they were like, we asked you many, many times.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't listening. And so thus began my full-time career as opposed to my part-time career as a metaphysical
So,
healer.
and
I
what year
love
are
it.
we in now? What year was this that this
gosh.
shifted for you?
That was 2012.
Okay.
Oh, so
Yeah.
not that long ago.
Not that long ago. Now,
Yeah.
mind you, I'd been
Doing it
25
on
years doing
the
metaphysics that
side.
way. Yeah,
Exactly.
now
On
it was
the side,
now I
just
was
not
hanging
your
the shingle.
chiropractic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally.
And
But
now
I love
you
it when the
have that-
universe, does something and drop kicks you out of.
Yeah,
Oh.
twice.
I mean,
really.
car accidents,
Yeah,
you know, it's
twice.
like Dumb and Dumber.
Exactly. I've been there, done that.
But those experiences, I mean, you needed to be a chiropractor so you could move on to the next phase, the next level of where you could help people.
Absolutely.
You needed all of that wealth of knowledge and all that understanding of.
And the vitalistic philosophy that went with it. And Judge, who was a
Interesting.
surgeon, says to me, you're not going to medical school because this is a mechanistic philosophy. This is pieces and parts medicine here. You need to learn the mind, body, spirit. You've got to understand that this
That
is a
connection.
tripod and each one equally as important as the other. And the only way you're going to get that education and the knowledge of the body is this is where we're putting you. And I went to Sherman College it was called Sherman College of Straight Chiropractic at that point, straight as in they didn't do any other types of modalities. It was just sheer chiropractic. And it was the best experience.
Wow.
I mean, the most wonderful.
Good.
And at this stage, this is in America that you did that.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you: did you go to Ireland before the metaphysical aspect of your business, or after? How did that correlate?
In the middle.
In the
Yeah.
middle.
So,
okay.
what?
Yeah. What took
So
you to
was that-
Ireland?
I'm in my final year of chiropractic school,
Yeah.
right? And I had now married that college sweetheart, and we had, of course, grown our separate ways because, I mean, seriously, imagine being married to that. Like, I'm getting like wake up calls in the middle of the night to go to the hospital,
Yeah.
not on a telephone,
Yeah. So you
and
were
it's
hard to live
And he
with.
was
yeah.
a wonderful, wonderful person.
Yeah.
And I look back now and just go, oh wow, what he had signed up for, and boy did he see me. I mean, he saw me through a lot of stuff at that stage, but we just had to go this way. Yeah. And I have the deepest respect for him, and what he had to endure. Because I mean, on a normal day, I am freaky, But at that stage, I had a guy who had moved into the house as a housemate, and his name was Jojo Janssen. I will love him till the day I die. He was just such a great character. And he was fasting one week and then eating cheeseburgers the next. He was the dichotomy of living.
Yeah.
And I love that about somebody.
Yeah.
You don't be so stringent that you can't ride the
Absolutely.
wave.
Yeah.
And so he comes to me one day. And I am working my way through school. I've got 2 jobs. I'm full-time in school. And he says, do you mind if I have a party at the house tonight? Sure, knock yourself out. He says it's a psychic party.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, me and all these things that have happened, I'm like, really? And it's so skeptical. And I was like, look, do whatever you want to because I've got to work tonight. And so I go to work and I come back. Well, people were still there. And this little house was set up that there was a sitting room here and a sitting room here. And so people were kind of queued up here and waiting to go in to see Psychic Susie. And hey, everybody. And I walk in and I go back to my bedroom. Well, time passes. And next thing I get a knock on the door. He's like, hey, she wants to see you. I'm like, does she now? And I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm good. No, really, she has something she nedes to say to you. And I was
compelled.
like, okay. So in I go, and I'm sitting face to face with Psychic Susie, and I'm like, whatever, And she says, have you been seeing something recently? And I said, something what? And she goes, symbols of some sort. Now, I had not told a living soul. My mother, who I tell everything to, included.
Yeah.
And for the past while, I had been seeing these symbols, and they were coming in sets of 3. And talk about burning bush, they were flaming orange so that I'd get it. I mean, like, you obviously have come to realize now that I can be a little thick when it comes to getting the lesson.
Yeah.
So they're like flashing this stuff. So until I would write this down, the next set of symbols would come, and there end up being 21. So I've told nobody this because, I mean, there's freaky and then there's freaky.
Yeah, you just don't want.
And I don't know what they mean either. I knew they had something to do with my past.
So you've been drawing these symbols.
I've got them right. They look like an alphabet, right?
Okay. Very
And
cool.
so she goes, you've been seeing some symbols. Yeah.
Now
And she
you're
goes,
intrigued.
do you have any idea what they are? And I said, no. And she goes, well, these are like a beacon. These are like a flashlight. You've set these up for yourself to take you on the next leg of your journey. And where might that be? Because I'm broke. I'm in my last year of school. And she goes, you're going abroad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, right. I got like $2. And she goes, no, really, you're going abroad and soon. And I'm like, whatever. So the next Monday, I get called into the office at the school. At this stage, I was the president of the student body, always the cheerleader type. And he said, just wanted to let you know that the chiropractic school over in England has actually invited you as president of the student body to come over and speak. I'm
Wonderful.
like, get out of here, in much more colorful language. And I'm like, really? And who might be paying for this? And like, well, the school's going to send you over. And I was like, you've got to be joking me.
Wow.
So off I go to England.
And what part of England was this?
This was in Bournemouth.
Lovely.
Fabulous Bournemouth. And I go over there, and so immediately I'm just in love with the whole thing. And so now I've got this desire, and it goes beyond desire to this drive, and it goes beyond drive to this, you must go back. And so I go back and become the first student in my school to do a foreign externship.
Oh, wow.
Because in that final year of school, people are externing in doctors' offices around town and this kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm going over, and I'm going to go to Ireland. Because there had been a doctor who had been in my school from Ireland, and he graduated. And I'm like, I want to set this up and go there. And they're like, no, well, we don't really do that. And I'm like, we're doing it. And so I literally pushed until I made it happen. And so before I went over there to do this externship, I go on this little mini trip. And I left Bournemouth and went over on a weekend. I think it was Patrick's Day even. A weekend trip over to Ireland. And a friend of mine had come with me from South Carolina. And we're like touring around, and somebody had loaned us a car, and we were very fortunate. We land in this pub in Galway, and we're sitting there chatting. And this, beautiful, lovely ginger comes up to us, Irish guy, and he's like, you two ladies, touring around? Yeah. And it was just, he was as innocent as could be. And he's like, do you want somebody to come show you around? Sure.
Yeah.
And so we start touring around. And I'm acting like a loon because I have told that friend about these symbols. She said these symbols were a beacon, and they were getting me over here, and they have something to do with my next step of the journey. And so this guy's like, you know what? I got to stop. You are so weird. I got to know what's going on here. You're like whispering, you're acting strange, you're looking for stuff.
Saying this to you.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm looking for these symbols. He goes, why didn't you say so?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So this is the land of the midnight sun. It stays light until late. Yeah.
In the summer.
And so he's like, get in the car. We drive the whole way back across Ireland, and we land at this place called Newgrange, which is a megalithic tomb over 5,000 years old. And we pull up. Of course, it's closed. It's a national park. And it's closed, and we pull up to the front gates, and there in wrought iron on the front gate is one of these symbols. And I'm like, hair is standing up, freaking out. And he goes, come on, you're leaving. You're going back to America. This might be the only chance you ever get to do it. So next thing, I find myself jumping a fence, running through a field, breaking into a National Irish Monument to see these symbols. And there they were.
Yeah.
Not all of them,
Wow.
but enough to go, oh my gosh, is Ireland the next step?
Yes.
And so that is how I got to Ireland.
You
And
took
so
heed. You actually followed through on that.
yeah, and so
Wow.
people are like, did you move there for a man? No.
Yeah, much very important.
Flaming symbols.
Yeah. So that was what year was that? That you
That was
actually
in
moved there?
98.
98.
And then I was in practice by 99 there.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about your new book that's coming out, because I know you've written talk about some of the books you've even written already. I
Okay,
know you
well,
did
so-
the Chakra Fairies.
Yeah,
which is-
Chakra Fairies and Pocket Coach. And my first book that's with Simon &
can hold it
Schuster
up, yeah.
is called Promised by Heaven.
Yeah.
And this is actually my first 3 books.
Yes, the trilogy.
And so when my girls were born, their father was from New Zealand, and he was there until they were 1 and 3, and then he left the country. And as you can imagine, I have that effect on people. So I'm raising these girls on my own. Well, I start to notice at a very early age, hold on a second. You don't have to just die in an accident to get this. They're starting to say and do some very interesting things.
You're noticing.
And I'm like, here it is.
Kind of the same gift.
Yep. And so we're talking past lives. We're seeing the guy who, our cottage that we live in, the guy who is the only one who'd ever lived in that cottage, who's deceased. And he would regularly visit, and the girls they'd call his name as they'd walk in the back door. He was the man in their lives, but not the body. And so I'm like, okay, I had nobody really. My parents were supportive of me, Mary Helen.
yes.
But I had no one to support the gifts that were coming in
Yes.
because nobody knew what to do.
And you were in what an incredible environment, because it's so strong in Ireland. I mean, that
boy.
sixth sense is just.
Is it?
It's
Oh, my
it's
gosh.
the
Wow.
heart of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And even though it's a very Catholic nation, they're all so deeply into their Celtic roots
Yes.
and their Druidic roots and their
Absolutely.
the shamanism, the goddesses.
And the
it's
Welsh.
just there.
Yeah.
The Welsh.
Welsh and
Yeah.
Scottish and the,
There's
and the
a,
Britons, all the Celts.
My ex-husband, my last name is Boyle, Boyle, from Boylestown in Ireland.
Boyle's about 40 minutes from where I live.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
Wow.
we
yeah,
have
and it's
the
also
crest.
the UF hotspot of Ireland.
Oh,
wow.
well,
Documented on
really?
numerous occasions.
Okay, so there's something within the lineage of my children.
Exactly.
You know, because we have the crest. They went back. His family went back and brought back the actual certificate with the crest that the we are the fam or they are the family.
So we're from the same county.
Yeah,
County
Isn't
Roscommon.
that funny? Yeah, that's my only link to Ireland. I've personally never
Well,
been.
now you have
Well,
a friend.
Yeah,
Like, I'm expecting a
I
visit.
have a friend.
But when I
Always
saw
wanted
all
to
this
go.
behavior
Yes,
happening,
yes.
I was like, I got to start writing this down. And my mother is a wonderful scribe.
Yeah.
She has written down every word I think I've ever said in my lifetime because I've come out with some crackers, as you can well imagine. And she kept these notebooks.
Yeah.
And I'm a journaler. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to call it Promise because that's what Dad always called me. Anytime I ever got into distress or, I was feeling down or troubled or anything, he would go, don't you know you're promised? And he would remind
Yeah, I
me
love
of
that
that
phrase.
celestial visit. And so I'm
Yeah,
like, promised. So this became the first book. And then Promise became Circles of Light. And then Circles of Light became The Land Beyond the River.
So the trilogy.
And that trilogy. And so time marches on and I'm speaking at an event that was honoring the life of Maeve Binchy in Dublin, and she was a prolific popular fiction author, just
Exactly.
amazing. And so a friend of mine had been telling me that I needed to meet this other author, and her name is Patricia Scanlon, and she is now, of course, a 21 times over best-selling author in Ireland, UK, and just a love. And she's an amazing person, deeply spiritual, and just a master at her craft. She happens to be speaking at the same event. And our mutual friend, Aidan Story, had said, you guys have to meet. Well, it wasn't happening. And then boom, we land in the same place. And it was just like, bang, sisterhood immediately.
Yeah, it's not funny.
And so she takes my first 3 books, and I get this phone call one day. And she's like, are you sitting down? And I said, yes. And she goes, I hope you don't mind, but I sent your books to Simon & Schuster. Oh, okay.
Of course I mind.
Yeah, of course I mind.
really.
Exactly. And she's like, and they want to take them. And I'm like, what? And so thus began the
Yeah.
path. And so those 3 books became Promised by Heaven. They changed that name too. And so in the middle of that, I wrote The Chakra Fairies, which is
What is that?
the magical mantra for children. So it's a story I used to tell my girls at bedtime, teaching them about the chakra system and how not to go to bed at night with their stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I made up the story with these fairies, and the fairies would swoop in and work through each chakra, and we're talking about the body or our heart and our ability to listen, and ended up writing this book. And
Oh,
so
it's just lovely.
you're gonna love
Yeah.
this, guys, and I have a copy for each of you.
Oh,
but
fabulous.
my author in Athlone, or my artist, Anna
Yeah.
Bowles, is just this up and coming fabulous artist. She is a fairy herself, and she
Yeah.
has just made the most beautiful
Oh, look
artwork.
how
And they're
gorgeous
just
that
fairies
is.
are beautiful.
Yeah.
And so that became my first children's book. And then when my father passed in 2012, he was this great motivational speaker, and he was always popping a quote.
Yeah.
And he was great. Again, Mom wrote everything down. I wrote everything down. And so I came up with this book called The Pocket Coach. And this is my dad winning the Virginia State Championship in 1975,
Oh,
which was like a movie.
cool.
And he had written a book for all of his children where he wrote down in a prayer book. There was a prayer on this page by an author called Bailey, and then there was a blank page on the other side, and he wrote all of his thoughts and feelings about that prayer.
Oh, lovely.
And we each got a copy. And so I had saved mine all of these years, and so I ended up taking his thoughts and putting them on the other page and leaving the page blank so that you might share that with your children.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so that's how that came to pass.
Yeah.
Gosh.
And so eventually this new book that we're
Yes,
doing
yes.
now, which is Bringing Death to Life,
Yes.
Trisha lost her parents, lost her mother about 10 years ago, and then her father died 2 years ago. And she had some big questions as a deeply spiritual individual, but with some pretty freaky friends. Aidan Story, who's an angel healer in Ireland, and Pam Young, who is, her mother was head of the Spiritualist Church in Manchester.
Oh, wow.
So she grew up in that
all
environment.
around
She's
that.
an amazing intuitive and very connected to the mothers and the goddess grandmother type energy. And so Trisha goes, let's write a book that's going to help people get through this fear of death. And so we have written this book collectively, the four of us, where Trisha is the narrative voice, and she asks the questions, the big questions, and we go through from each of our perspectives, everything from suicide to mass exodus, genocide, death of a pet, death of a loved one. My mom ended up writing a chapter on the death of a spouse because she was the only one in the group who had lost a spouse.
Right.
And it covers the whole gamut. And it is just, I'm so proud of this work because it's really a beautiful
is the book
piece.
in September.
This is the one that's coming out in September.
Wow.
It's on Amazon, Bringing
is.
Death to Life for pre-order. And it's really, I'm so proud of this piece because it is really going to allow a lot of people to find some peace.
I was just going to say, it sounds like it really, a lot of,
the fear around it is unmeasurable.
Exactly.
You know?
And see, in Ireland, we still do the wakes.
Yes.
We still do the 3-day celebration. We
Do
still
that for my
celebrate a
father-in-law.
life.
Yeah.
And, very rarely do you see someone dying in a hospital hooked up to stuff unless the circumstances absolutely won't allow them to be at home.
Exactly. I just went through three deaths in the last the last year now, but they all happened within 8 months of each other. But it really was a celebration of life.
Yes.
And because of my sort of belief system, to me it was just sort of energy going from the form into the formless, back into the formless. And,
Yes.
and I still feel my mother around me, my sister.
Oh, absolutely.
But but a lot of people do, if they don't believe in reincarnation or they don't have that belief, it can be so sad and so scary. And
And what
a
we
book like
find is that
this-
traditional religion lets a lot of people down in the most
Yes.
crucial moment.
Yes.
And I want to share this because it's one of my most favorite stories. And to anybody who's listening, if you've heard this before, just bear with me because this just really was profound to me. My father, who'd been a minister his entire life, he was in the last stages of Alzheimer's. And of course, he was within the Christian confines, albeit very positive as far as, we're all going to, we're going to make that move and Jesus will show us the way and all. And he's in the nursing home and he has not been able to speak for months at this stage. He's babbling. And he was a shuffler. He had that sundowner syndrome and he found it very difficult and he was agitated all the time. And this one night, it was very late and my mother and I are sitting there. And Dad suddenly walks over and gets into the bed, which he would not do because he was petrified. When he was still able to speak, he wouldn't lie down because he was afraid he was going to die if he did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where is your faith? Where's your belief system when you need it the most? And so he gets into the bed and he's smiling, he's giddy, he's laughing, and he's reaching up to the ceiling. And he turns to my mom and he goes, I can see it. And we haven't heard him speak in ages, mind you.
Yeah.
So we're like, whoa. And I said, what can you see, Dad? And he said, the land beyond the river. And it's prettier than anything you ever wrote about, darling. And we're like, okay. So my mom's looking at me and she's like, is he dying now?
Yeah.
And I said, I don't think so because I don't see the fireworks.
Yeah.
Because when a human being is leaving this plane, it's not the light dimming down. It's revving up to go. And it looks like fireworks. And so he's there. And I'm like, well, tell me, Dad, what do you see? And he goes, Mama's there. And she looks so young. And I was like, oh, that's great. And next thing he freezes. And his eyes are as big as saucers. And he's like, oh, my gosh, Daddy's here.
Aww.
Now, to my father and his box of Christianity, my grandfather had not cut the mustard.
Yes.
And his fear his entire life was that, unfortunately, he had not made it to heaven. So now you've got this man, and he's looking, and he sees his father there, despite all of his shortcomings. And he turns to my mom, and he goes, Helen, I've had it wrong all along. Everybody's welcome here. You can't mess this thing up. And I was like, knock me over with a feather. I'm done.
Yeah.
And I just sat there. And my mom, as she's sitting there, and those beautiful green eyes are tearing up, and she looks over at me in this most profound moment. She goes, write that down. You're going to use that later. And boy, have I used it because, I mean, it just says it all to me.
Yes,
that
absolutely.
Even though he had this belief system and in the later years, that fear,
Yes.
that in the end it showed up for him. And there it was. And all of us get to go.
Wow.
You can't mess up.
Good story.
We
It's a
are
good
really
inspirational
running out of
story for
time
those
here.
that could be in fear.
Yes.
Yes. Let us hear a little bit about what you've got coming up besides
Yes.
the book. I know you're going back to Ireland and
your
what you're
contact
doing.
info.
Yes, contact info and any way people
I'm in
can
LA for another
get in
month.
touch
I'm
with
so
you.
excited.
Wonderful.
I'm doing healing sessions while I'm here.
Great.
And my website is www.maryhelenhensley.com, and that's Hensley. So MaryHelenHensley.com. All of my info is on there.
I was just going to say, it's a
You
great
can order the
website.
books.
Everything that you're
Yeah.
about is
Yeah.
on there.
Wonderful.
It's fabulous.
Are you doing any more public?
Yeah, you just
I
had
am
a
actually doing
workshop.
something with Peter Bedard. Again, that'll be up on the website because
Before you leave
I think
town
it's the
here
5th
in
of
LA?
August. Yeah.
Oh, you are?
I
Because
think
he
it's
said he didn't have anything else
Wow.
planned.
We do have one more thing.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll
Fabulous.
check into
He was
that.
having a menopausal.
Yeah.
No, it'll be on the.
Okay.
We'll get that onto the
Wonderful.
website. But
Okay,
I'm on
great.
all social media. I'm very
Oh,
easily
lovely.
accessible,
All right.
and I
Well-
welcome questions.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Really.
We have run out of time, but it was fabulous getting to know you and
Come
hearing
visit
your
us
stories.
again.
I will, and
you
come
know?
visit me.
Yeah,
will.
hey,
I will.
I'm
Time
taking
I'm
you
in
up on
Wales.
it. Anytime somebody says that to me and I take them up on it, they get very shocked. When I actually, they're like, "Really?" And so,
Girlfriend, you're
you-
talking to the woman who Skyped her dogs earlier today, and the house sitters are there from Australia, from Spain.
Love
you
it.
are
Lovely.
welcome.
Okay.
Thank you
Well, we'll
so
meet again.
much. Well, thank you,
you.
everyone. We will see you next
next
week.
week. Yes.
Have a fabulous week. And again, thank you so much.
Yes,
Thanks.
Wonderful.
Thank all
Mary
three
Helen.
of you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Mary
I appreciate you.
Great.
Bye.